Okay. Hello, everyone. Welcome to tonight's episode. Tonight's episode has a significance which I am not sure how far it will echo. But I thought I would share an idea, something I noticed that, a certain parallels between certain ideas. And so I want to begin by saying that I feel Einstein has left behind a quote, not just a scientific contribution, but an incredible cultural contribution. And Einstein has this quote where he says, "You cannot solve a problem from the same state of consciousness that created it." You cannot solve a problem from the same state of consciousness that created it. I can repeat it as much as I want, but it will never be enough because really it's such an important idea. It means that the eyes that you have, that you are seeing your problem in order to see the answer in that simultaneous moment, it means you need to have different eyes. And this is something many people don't notice about success, that it is in some sense strangely a journey. A journey where various moments, it's like endless micro battles, and eventually after a while the person looks back and feels something. Feels like they achieved something. In this quote by Einstein, that a problem cannot be solved from the same state of consciousness, I suddenly noticed that it's another way of saying that, let's say if a problem was restated differently, would it be the same problem? Pretty much if the eyes have to change, if you're looking at something that's a problem and you have to be able to perceive a different state, a completely be conscious of the moment in a completely different state, in order for there not to be the problem, it's a change of realism, it's a change of reality. So continental philosophers, a little about that. Continental philosophers, you can say there something unique happened. Of course, first there was philosophy and then science branched out from it. But now it has come to a point where it was as if like first philosophy was driving the vehicle of civilization. Now it has come more towards a very secular, and the analytical philosophers pretty much have the louder voice now. But back in the day, the continental philosophers had the loudest voice. Now, the difference is that the analytical philosopher is not, is considering the concreteness and the empirical, pretty much objective realism. That means the difference between I would say an analytical, of course, when I looked into it, there's different people, like there's different people using these words in different ways. That means there's different philosophers arguing on what it means actually, an analytical philosopher and not analytical, but what it truly means to be a continental philosopher. But pretty much it's seeing language in a mysterious position, which can imply that rather than the universe is made of objects, it could have a non-objective position. So pretty much it's like the continental philosophers are there saying that it could be that the cause of the existence is not material, pretty much. I would say it like that. They were trying to keep the unknown alive. But in analytical philosophy, you're limited. Your ideas, your philosophical speculations are limited to your analysis. So there is no unknown. That means literally the analytical scientific method of things is very strange because it is not for a student. This may sound strange, but science is the issue is that if there is something going on beyond visibility, you will never know because it's limited to the visible. That's the issue. At least in my view, of course, there's nothing wrong. These are just factions, you can say. These are just different divisions of seriousness with the world's position, from different eyes. So the continental philosopher actually had a huge attention on language. That means those people who are naturally continental philosophers suddenly notice language has a huge part in this, what we are calling meaning. They see the thin ice of language. You tend to go towards the continental philosophical route, you know. So I would say continental philosophers, they have a huge interest in the evolution of meaning through the evolution of language. Now Einstein, this incredible scientist, has said this notion of you can't solve the problem from the same state of consciousness. What does that mean? When we look at things from a certain way, imagine you have a problem and you're looking at that moment. If you were to interpret the problem as a sort of mathematical equation or just as a sentence, you would be able to write it down in a certain language, right? So when we look at, as Albert Einstein says, a new consciousness, you cannot solve the problem from the same state of consciousness. Technically, he's saying you need a new state of consciousness, buddy, if you want to solve your problems, But now, what does a new state of consciousness mean? A new state of consciousness means that you are experiencing something that wasn't there before. So technically, Einstein here has given all continental philosophers the explanation of why we have to endlessly evolve our language. Because you cannot solve, what was the quote? A problem cannot be solved from the same state of consciousness that created it. You know? So what does that mean? That means, isn't it strange that endless new human beings are being born, but the language is not updating as quick as the people are? We're teaching the people. It's like in that all that time that we're teaching people how to speak, after they've learned how to speak, now we're like, all right, stretch the linguistic system, the linguistic boundaries. So for all those interested in language, Albert Einstein has given a very excellent algorithm that in some sense, if the problem exists in a certain state of consciousness, if there are certain variables changed, even the smallest variable changed, it wouldn't be the same state of consciousness. So what does that mean? As we obtain new experiential eyes, there's coming a responsibility to create the language for it. That means whatever state we find ourselves in, we put it in language, do we not? Everything is put in language. The person suffering, it's a linguistic relationship with themselves. It's a relationship with a character and a story. So unless something changes from the character, something changes from the setting, how can the story change? So what this means is, because the human being is breathing, because technically every moment feels like a new moment, technically there is never a problem, there is a view of a problem. You think in the chat section says, so the solution is changing your mind. It's not about changing your mind. It's pretty much we are left in an ideologically as a concept in a context. Okay, there's a concept and a context. The concept is the self, the most immediate self we find, and then there's this overlying context. Now it depends. Sometimes if the world changes, then you might not have to change, or you can change with it. But if you change, your world changes. So the whole point of Einstein was like, when you look at something and you're like, oh my God, this problem, you got to look at it differently to find the solution. The same eyes that see the problem are not going to be the same eyes that see the answer. And I'm saying right now, our eyes as 8 billion human beings is seeing the world at a certain state of consciousness, at a certain acceptance of what language and everything else means. Do you know? And if we were to change, do you know? That means to bring forth a new state of consciousness. Literally, if right now, let's say an advanced extraterrestrial species came down and they're like, we don't like your state of consciousness, human beings. Ta-da! They snap their fingers and instantly, everybody's state of consciousness had changed. Do you know? So then that would be a moment we'd realize we always had the ability. Do you see? Sometimes you lose the game because you define yourself too early. And sometimes you lose the game because you define your opponent too early. You know? So I feel Einstein, in this quote of his, I can't emphasize this enough, he's pretty much saying you need new eyes to play a new game of the same life. And the new eyes, the new consciousness that's pretty much what the mystic, the yogi was doing back in the day. The yogi was going and realized everything in life in regards to meaning, in regards to all the stories, it's just language and movement. If you stripped away the sounds and the movement from the human being, what would you be? You would just be. Do you know? That means we have a consciousness to our potential before we move, suggesting a hidden room. Because it's not enough. I know what's going to happen. If we don't create our life, our better life, then people are going to go. Let me tell you what it is. Something strange in human psychology that for some reason it is easier to break things than build them. When you want to build something, even a building, it takes a long time. But you want to destroy it, you can destroy it in an instant. Now check this out. We've become an emotional civilization. It's easier for us to destroy than create. The more uncomfortable we're becoming and the more the person becomes they are pushed into getting locked in their inner realms, they won't look at their outer realms. That was the whole thing. Somebody, for me, I to be honest, I love soccer, the game, you know. But I there was this whole angle of sports from a political view that what if if you give someone what they desire, they keep staying trapped in their inner realm. That's the issue. Right now, it's a strange situation in 2020 in civilization. You see, a lot of human beings, they're not innovating, they're just surviving. It's savage. It's scary. It's so scary. It's so scary to see having the complexity of the human mind, but to only doing what a robot in the future can replace. Do you know, now more than ever, we have to notice our minds in the picture of our human life? When else? Where else? Do you know? And all these conversations that are being, in some sense, let me tell you what's going on in the world. Everybody's trying to cover each other's eyes from their own cruelty. We have to treat language as a technology that we are inhabiting certain structures of it. And for the continental philosopher, the roar, the sound, the symphony of the unknown has become louder than the symphony of the known. For the analytical philosopher, the symphony of the known is louder than the unknown. And the importance of the unknown is that it is where all the what ifs of reality live. And so, if we realize we require new eyes, and life is not about just you being in a certain mindset and judging your whole life's value, this journey of endless days. You know, for me, it is very unique. There's been nights, of course, I have looked at a bridge the wrong way, but there is also moments where I just realized that I don't know enough. One of the most contentful sentences that brought me content, actually, I heard it from Terence McKenna. He said, "Nobody knows enough to worry." Nobody knows enough to worry. That means you don't know even enough to know yourself to even worry about who you will be. Do you see what I mean? Do you see what I'm saying? In your outer realms, live simply. In your inner realms, be as free as you want. You know? This is why when I speak, I feel like it is a room of minds. It's like the value system is different than just being on an island with objects, you know? Imagine being on an island for so long, and then when you see people, you know, people are like, "Hey man, are you shy? Are you stressed?" You know, you're like, "No, I just haven't seen people for so long," you know, and you see what I mean? It becomes something where there is no boundaries after you see the experience and the directness of it. It was pretty much the difference between those beings who had piloted in their inner realms and those beings who hadn't. Pretty much the sign of the term pilot of consciousness I use is a human being that has had an incredible trust in their mind. Because you see, this life is not just us sitting in a round circle, 8 billion people holding hands. Yay, we agree to the same ideology. Yay. You know, it's about unleashing the chained titans. And what does that mean? That means the titan, if you see it as the ego of a god, for the first time, the ego is becoming so alert and intelligent that it instantly dismantles. What does that mean? That means today we're living as objects with name tags. Tomorrow we will be minds that history will become our paint. So if we notice that language comes from images and a problem is a certain image and you got to be able to look at that image in a different way. So with your eyes changing as the experiencer shifts, there needs to accompany language generation. Because I don't know, right now we're not at a point where you know everybody's carrying like an exact same copy of a dictionary, not even different companies, you know. So it becomes something where right now, or we don't have, let's say, our heads connected to like some computer interface, you know, some computer thing to one computer where we have access to everything. Do you know, sometimes I feel if we stop knowing that we're unknown, we stop existing. Without the unknown, that's like literally like um, it's part of the yin yang symbol. If it's avoided, then it's like it causes suffering. You know, sometimes in your life, just imagine an astronaut in space. You have these oxidizers. You have these things in the astronaut suit that generate oxygen. They they suddenly burst the oxygen outside, and it in some sense gives the astronauts kind of thing suit, you know, with a movement, right? So it's similar to that. You know, when you come to living as an object, there is unique principles. There's the laws of physics there, and there's the actual alertness of an animal in a physical landscape. So after you have lived as an animal, you will wonder what is living here, you know, or who are you living for? Either these are both exits. And as you do this, when you wonder about who is really here, then begins the greatest mystery of the lifetime. that what is alive here experiencing this time, what is standing under all the stars, that without their light there would be nothing to understand, what is this event that we have all come to be 1/3 of our lives, like not 1/3, but like 1/3 of your life you're sleeping, 1/3 of it you're probably moving around and just physical engagement, and then 1/3 maybe we're sitting and living as minds and articulating the uniqueness and the sophistication of the realm. Because I am telling you, desires don't care for man. Desires is literally, your biology is designed to satisfy itself, but there is something more. There's something more that you can satisfy yourself. You can eat 100 cakes, but when you suddenly realize you have been eating them in a world that is hungry, then it just breaks your heart, as it did for the Buddha. The Buddha's soul shattered when he left the palace he was born and suddenly saw that there was suffering. There was some messed up stuff in life. There's sickness. There's old age. People don't have the same energy levels. People don't have the same even behaviors. So when we suddenly realize we're changing beings, look at the uniqueness of people meeting each other even. You know? I think what it is that we have processed three-dimensional information. We have processed even fourth dimensional in regards to time. What time is it? What history? All part of the localization and pinpointing ourselves in the void. Now we have come to a point where we're like, all right, we see space and time, but we also see that there is art, that there is novelty, that before there were the words of space and time, somebody thought of those words. Probably somebody named Tim thought of time. you know I feel it's strange. I feel we are like incredibly next level skilled pilots. We open our eyes, as even in yogic karma, there was the first level of karma, which is everything you have accumulated. Then there is, out of all that you have accumulated, the fruits of it, what arises. This tends to be your personality, your identity, the fruits of all the accumulations of your being. And then after some of these fruits of accumulated experiences of the being, I'm speaking of from a Vedic context here, so technically it's okay to identify as a transmigratory soul. but, what, but what I'm saying is that out of the accumulated karma, there was the karma that had led to fruits, the fruit, the kind of, sprouting karma. And then after the sprouting karma, there was the free will and the decision of the free will. You see, people say they have karma, or they say they are in a karmic wheel. Karma is not you. Karma is the universe's cause and effect relationships. That means technically, like the scientist, when what was it, like the third law? As cause and effect was being noticed, the scientist was like, no way, no way. Endless cause and effect, endless types of cause and effect. It's just mind-boggling. It's like I'm the person sitting here, trying to think about, all right, what am I going to do tomorrow? And meanwhile, there's stars dying in the galaxies. There is eruptions, there's mysteries breathing that we have yet to uncover as a species, but onwards we go. It's like let me tell you what it is. Right now, what's happening for the first time is that it's as if we are like it's like advanced beings are being thrown on an island. And so what do these advanced beings do? All they know is advancement, and all they can do is just see what tools are accessible. That means there was no longer an allegiance to a thought when all thoughts have bowed to man's next step. What does that mean? That means your past worships your future. Your future better not worship your past. That makes no sense. The past was living for the future, and if the future sees exactly as the past, what was the past living for? You know, we must honor the void to see it full. And to honor the void, that is very rare. That's like seeing a dragon that never doesn't exist, you know? Like Chinese mythology. I feel actually legend and mythology was a suggestion of how back in the day there was actually a subjective evolution and people had more of a sensitivity to their inner realms. Nice. So, guys, do you think says I'm realizing the value of exercising the pause before response? That is mindfulness, guys. It's just for a second in regards to the details of everywhere you move, having this hyper alertness of how things were before you entered and how they changed after, you know? So, I feel that Einstein was polymath. His wisdom, his skill level was so intense that if he had wanted to, he would have been in multiple arenas skillful, you know. But he played his part as a humble scientist, and that is big enough. Uh, it's all chess moves. That's all I see. This reality is actually a linguistic chess game. And when you realize that, what is it a chess game between? It is a chess game between the unknown void and the known matter. That means if somebody tells you, what matters, man? You'll be like, matter, man, that's all we see. You know? But if somebody says what doesn't matter, you will strangely see everything that is keeping matter here. So when you realize that what you don't know is actually your teacher, don't fear your eyes. Don't fear your mind's secret melody. After some point of, I think you live honest for maybe like 2 months, you'll suddenly notice a different shift in your karma. And if you listen to your intuition afterwards, then you'll suddenly be pulled towards the rhythm. Because what it is man is actually in a very strange position where we look at creatures below us and we're like, man, none of them can ask questions. None of them care. Do you think the squirrel on the tree cares about calculus? You think the bird flying cares about aerodynamics? No, the bird is just being. So we see the simplest stage of life as things just being, and then what makes these things complex? It's their movement, and then what makes them even more conscious, more complex than movement? Their consciousness to their movement, right? And so right now we're human beings that are conscious of our movement. Literally, I remember when I was a kid, there was this like toy I had where it was literally like this metal thing which you had to move around. You literally had to imagine this. Oh man, how do I even? I don't know what it is, guys, but it was like this. There was this metal pole, and there was this circle which had a handle, and you had to hold the handle and make sure the circle didn't touch the metal inside, or there would show a light or something. You know, pretty much the best game to play if you wanted to be a surgeon or an artist. Now thinking about it. So we have to change our state of mind to see something new. if the eyes we have are seeing a problem, then we can't. The solution is not going to just be with these eyes. Technically, the solution has to be a journey, some progression, some experiential attainment. So I feel people should actually care for cultivating experience. There's something that warriors would do. Pretty much, they had no choice. Pretty much, they would go into a messed up battle, like war back in the day, and at the end of the war, if they were still alive, they would just put their sword into the ground and sit down and just take in what had just happened. How they had somehow survived the cruel engines of life's ignorance. Life's social ignorance. So we need new eyes to have a new language, and as even Ludwig Wittgenstein says, the limits of my world are the limits of my language are the limits of my world. And then Hafez, the Sufi mystic poet from 700 years ago, he says, the words you speak become the house you live in. So what does that mean? That means the body is housed in matter, the mind is housed in language. So technically, it means simultaneously as we're having a life as an object, we're having a life as a subject, but a subject in a story context, in a narrative. This is why, like, some scholars, some continental philosophers have said the whole world seems like even a language, something where something as suddenly was said to arise. Like it's like we can't reverse engineer to the uniqueness of how after the Big Bang, and then there was a cosmic inflation. In like less than a second, everything just popped out suddenly. There was phenomena that just popped out. You see what I mean? So just the fact that there is something of a design separate to us here kind of makes the whole world feel like a mystery, which makes people walk emotionally as if life is a simulation. That means we might have made a mistake. We might have, or maybe not a mistake, maybe it was an evolutionary chess move that we had to make, you know? But I think the peak of knowledge is the unknown. So for the first time, we will build a civilization where we will see why artists and those who are looking for the new, you know, are not going to be learning from those who have made the past certain. There has to be a shift. That means literally, if our civilization, if our planet has a problem, literally, the planet has to, you can't solve the. The planet has to change its state of mind. The planet has to stand up and look at itself differently. But the planet can't stand up. It is only the mind of man who can notice itself having a different relationship. So it took us 4 billion years just to notice we're all different. You know. And so it really depends on evolution, because let me tell you what your life is. Your life is like a boardroom where time is coming in, and you are the CEO, and time is the manager, let's say. Or let's say it's your business, it's a small business, and time is like, all right, let's say manager. And then time's like, what do you want me to do, life? What do you want me to do with all this, And if life doesn't care to access the design and learn and grow from unknown new dimensions, it will stay the same. And it's like a metaphor for it would be stale water goes bad. What that means is like a river, the water is changing. But a sort of like puddle, it becomes a place where like an insect real estate market. So it becomes. So that's the thing. Ultimately, we are just objects that somehow have evolved to subjects to themselves. Now, as subjects, are like, what is the meaning of the object? Like, and then realizing that as a subject, they can't think about the subject as an object. That is true mysticism. When you actually stop, like first the person, sure, you get interested in teachers, but then the whole point of the outer guru is to tell you, hey man, look in a mirror. you know And so the point of the outer guru is to show you your inner guru. Once you find the inner guru, then you realize you have to move your will in accordance to the harmony of how your principled universal philosophy has allowed an antenna for the logos to find you. We are not just words. We are the experience of the journeying through worlds. You know, Matsuo Basho, the Zen master, would say something so next level. Pretty much I was like, whoa. He said the journey itself is my home, and people are trying to journey to get to their homes. We're trying to journey to get to a better future rather than creating a civilization that is win-win. You know, that the human mind is welcomed as much as the labors of the human body. Right now, the labors of the human body are welcomed, but not the creativity of the mind. Even in a lot of corporate situations, I'm telling you, it's just literally like the ethical constitution of the world, because there is no honor. Because honor is missing, there is literally not enough of a value in civilization for people to step aside from who they are to actually live for something bigger, you know. In Vedanta, there was a story of an enlightened king. You know, usually in our history books, we hear kings who messed up, you know, who couldn't control their temptations, you know. But in Vedanta, there's a king, which there's something unique that happens in the story. A king, a leader of a kingdom, the most important man in that land back in the day. This king is in his throne room, and he's an enlightened king. That means he's actually living for the kingdom. He doesn't care about what's on his head. You know, that doesn't, like, that's just an object on his head. You know? And so this enlightened king, one night, I don't know if he had some egoic issue or something, but there was like the previous day, but in this dream, he suddenly dreams that he's a beggar. Can you imagine being a king? And then suddenly you dream you're a beggar, like actually getting the experience of a beggar in a dream. You know, and this king wakes up, and it's like a nightmare for his ego. He's like, what the fuck? He's like, and usually they would take dreams seriously, so they thought dreams were communications of what will happen to you in the future. It was like dreams were how the world communicated to you, you know? So the king dreams he's a beggar, and he goes to his wise guru buddy who's in the council or whatever, in the palace or whatever. And he goes to him, and he says, what do I do with this, pretty much? Like, I dreamed I'm a beggar, I'm a king. What is this? And the guru says to him, you're neither a king. You are neither a beggar. Who are you? And the guy suddenly snaps out of his allure for the ideological, and he suddenly realizes, and he says something like, I don't remember the exact words, but it was like, he says, I'm neither a king, I'm neither a beggar, I am something like the kingdom's presence. He doesn't say it like that, but it like metaphysically it would be something like that, you know. So that's the thing. That was the enlightened king, you know, a king that was in the world but not of it. Do you know that someone who saw the realm? And now the whole notion of it is this has become globalized. Do you know? And so right now I mean, think about it. Imagine there was no religion books, no religious books. Imagine there was no religion. You know, imagine that was just missing from the history books. It wasn't there. Do you know? People, what would they do? Do you know? What would they go? Eventually, the mind has to search for something that it finds contentment with. And that seems to be the key role of intuition, to be the master touch of the sculptor within, you know? Because I'm telling you, you might not believe it, but in all these talks that I give, upon recognizing I'm not the language, you start watching your moment. As you watch your moment, you can totally see why they said karma was a sort of accumulation, that there's endless impressions. That's why I'm saying when you go to the inner realms, you think it's empty. Do you know? Because we're trying to compare it to the realism of what's in the outer realm. But very few beings could look at their inner realms without actually noticing, like as if the outer realm didn't catch their attention first, you know? And I don't know, I feel silence is the greatest teacher of the known world of noises of knowledge, you know? Einstein had also said, um, we created time so everything doesn't happen all at once. I was thinking, what would that imply for the continental philosopher? You know what it would imply? For the first time, our species attempting to create a new prototype of a language that for the first time is timeless, that time doesn't burden us, that we are never late, you know, to our own lives display. That means, can you imagine we suddenly took time out of the picture? You know, not scientifically, I'm saying, not in regards to not forgetting the idea forever, but for a second, all cultural, social activities, time wasn't an issue. I know that things have to happen at a certain moment. It suggests the speed wasn't there, but I'm saying if there was a counter narrative and ethos, as if like, here's the thing. Somebody, I think it was my father who told me this. My father told me this. If somebody doesn't know how to do something, and they take a role because they have to or they want to or whatever, it's like you have to make the person understand what they're doing in that position, you know? So what that means is that communication and its accuracy, so it would mean like literally imagine you could never be late to work, but you knew through the significance and the sensitivity to the minds around you. You know, that means it wasn't like a time-based thing, you know, because time is literally, what is this? We find another way to torture ourselves, you know? You know, that's why so many people try online businesses, you know, and I'm telling you, they work. But the whole point of it is not just the person enduring. We don't want to be a species that just existed. You know, so what? A bit happier to itself. But an advanced civilization, a species that saw what was accessible, what tools were at hand, what technologies were in view, and marched towards the unknown. What greater glory can be told? What more? Where can divinity go? Even the greatest truth had found you. What would you do after? You know? You see, it comes down to the creative essence. So literally, creativity, you can say, is a staircase, is a step before um, the lessons of being. So if I was to kind of predict that if the attention was present and after this lifetime, what could potentially happen based on how my attention maneuvered, I could say that right now I'm experiencing a self in a world. Most likely, after this biological position, it will be a world in a self. What that means is it's like after the body's gone, the mind can only be the mind now. And when the mind can be the mind, it is like a heaven trying to get into a heaven. You know? It's like the person, it's like imagine the archetype, the ego was waiting at the pearly gates. The person looked beside it, there's, oh my God, another type of heaven is trying to get to heaven? You know? And little do people know that it is your breath that gives your attention an opportunity to direct whatever it is so far. You know, that's the beautiful thing about language. We need it to speak, to move, to communicate, yet we can never be it. We can never be just words. And I can't tell you how many times in my inner realms I have seen an advanced civilization. I have literally seen its movement, like how it's going to look like, you know? And the reason I feel I can see it is because it's so easy, because there's a geometrical roadmap. There's a geometrical connectivity. So I want you to think that right now we're in a reality where there's the past, present, future. And you're listening to my talk in the present as this is a live stream. Okay? Now I want you to imagine that as there is past, present, future, imagine simultaneously there is a pure geometrical dimension where there is no man, there is no world, there is no cosmos, there is no galaxy, there is no history, there is no joy or suffering. It is just pure geometry. It is energy's hidden kingdoms, I would say. This geometrical dimension. Now imagine if you had access to this geometrical dimension and you realize your mind was a movement from there. So when you realize everything can be reduced to pure geometrical existential interconnectivity, from that pure geometrical existential interconnectivity, the inner realms suddenly lift. And how your inner realms lift is as if you zoom back in every memory like a wind. For me, it's like a wind, like a breeze going back through every way I have existed to myself, and it returns and it finds the void. It's just various moments where I just feel like I sit down and my ego reverse engineers back into where it never existed. And then I am the watcher. And as the watcher, there is no disparity. There is no dichotomy. It's literally, it's as if chaotic things happen and you're like, okay, you watch it. And ordered things happen and you're like, okay, you watch it. And you suddenly realize you have watched this for so long that now in the human form, you can wield it. You can use duality. When the whole cosmic structure, duality has used us for eons, Now that we have a time to use duality, it just renders the world as humanity's last opportunity, It is the greatest life you will ever know, the life that is now. So from that geometrical dimension, you could look at the past. You start from the present. So let's hang on to this model that we are past, present, future. You're listening to me, and I'm speaking to you right now from the present. Now, what I'm saying is, if you notice this geometrical dimension, okay, this geometrical dimension that everything is equally a geometrical interconnectivity, you would suddenly see every point in your present narrative and a storyline of who you are, you can geometrically reverse engineer back to your memories, and you could look at any object, anything, and once the inner realms, they find the contentment of the unconditional geometrical dimension, then they can play. Then I could look at any object and you might not believe it. I've tried this so many times. I could look at anything and see a sort of geometrical evolution of it, But when I say geometry, that's when I'm not ignoring emotions. That's why the analytical philosophy was a bit lifeless. The Sufis would say, if you only use your intellect in this realm, it's like you're whipping a dead donkey to go faster, because the intellect needs to have known variables. Known variables means you're cutting up reality. This means that for the first time, every person has to feel the weight of the scholar's next step. Do you know that means everybody should care for knowledge, because the unknown, that's what we can do with it. It's like light enters our eyes, and what beams out is the curiosity of an animal that seems to have been dancing as a mind the whole time. as a field. So we are going to literally eradicate, literally, we might become so conscious energetically that we might transition from the notions of human psychology to simply a silent, energetic, and instant communicating kind of civilization, you know? Right now, for me, I feel it's like imagination has been held back. Literally, it's been exiled. Now, imagination, not like Napoleon, is kind of like, I'm telling you, from when I look at what's going on in the world, people are no more every day realizing the value of the new. And the value of the new allows you to forgive your past, by the way. Because the idea follows that if the person doesn't want to advance themselves, why should others advance them? You know? If the person is not willing to comb their own hair, why should others comb their hair? Do you see what I mean? And so I think what it is we are gifts to ourselves that as we live life, dimensions of it open. This is one of those nights where I feel that the soul wants to speak louder than the mind. From this book I wrote in 2015 called Commands of a Celestial General. This entry is called The Cosmic Dictation. This world has extended its arms to the arms of mankind. Have the eyes seen too much? What gives the more decent of us human beings a satisfaction beyond form? There is no guilty man when man, with a capital M, was not just a man. The cosmos is one intelligence. Welcome to the profound. Welcome the profound. Many children will begin finding new voices and past echoes. The world of the wanderer through eyes known. I'll read that again. The world of the wanderer through every known element of conscious thought in. Jesus. Okay, yeah. The world of the wanderer throws every known element of conscious thought into an ocean of absolute unknown being. If you found one light, no longer needing to turn the lights on, does that mean you have found your glow? The darkness of this world has learned to speak more than the light. But that was long ago, for in 1 second the search of eons can come to an instant stop. For once the cosmos reboots, all shoes must be taken off. That means there will come a point where all linguistic simulations will also break. And so you will be left with the experiencer that has blown the candle cake, the candle on the cake of your every birthday, you know. Another entry from Commands of a Celestial Commander. Miles away but smiles closer. This world has bestowed your ears with the task of hearing God through every corner and clear view. Let truth polish the mirror for you. There have been many traditional approaches to chaotic transformation into order. However, we are multi-preens. I don't know. I think that's a typo. I can't figure the word. However, we are multidimensionally present, meaning that our death means another birth, and our birth means another death. The loudest lawyers seem to be the golden ratio, but is a golden truth enough? See the beauty that turns your world through the axis of awe. Poetry is never written on the page, but in absolute depths of the mind. All trajectories of intent lead to a new advocate. Be free from worry, because worry has too much on its mind. As lame as lame is reborn through new lines, may one be one with all that is. Simple words are here to guide our complex ways. May humanity be the greatest blessing yet. There's an entry called Weightless from Commands of a Celestial General. It says, "Where does the weight of the world come from? Have you taken a container as your reality? Let the world move beyond its ignorance, for what was ignored cannot be left ignored once known to be present. The world works with the mystery of creation and the revelations of the Creator. We are all like ballistic missiles being exchanged for ballpoint pens, remembering that our drink can have the intensity of an explosion. Many nations will look at one image to become one nation. The image of the transcendent is imageless, and there lies the beauty of all truth. We think we know, but how can we when the world hasn't even shown us its full face? Don't just walk on the ground, for the next teachings belong to a formless sky. That is the space for all considerable change. There is a love here that will shift your perception beyond the ignorance of the perceiver, which at first is drawn by the lines of ideas. But then the emptiness within and without the place of conception will recalibrate all else." These are words written by a man dissolved in the kindness of mankind. Our existential allowance is the destiny of our destination. We are timeless, we are spaceless. Who has given you the idea of a self? An event. Who has given you the idea of a self? And what if your hands were as far as the edge of your eyes, could reach that far? By the way, guys, uh, somebody mentioned the School of Athens 2.0. I've decided to. I noticed there was an inefficient inevitability in the previous approach, so Anyways, for those interested in want to communicate through Discord or whatever, through the side door of the School of Athens, there's a link, you know. Anyways, back to the talk. Honestly, guys, it's just about attention, um, and civilization being so tolerant to welcome attributeless moments. Sometimes I feel before we are people, we're watching people. You know, before we are who we are, the world is moving first. And then there comes a moment in life where you have to start running with the world. Then you run at the same speed of the world, where you're in a sort of maintenance level. Then you go from the creative. So you can say that in life, let us say there's three major archetypes in Vedic thought of Brahman, Vishnu, and Shiva. Brahman was the archetype of endless creation. Imagine a dimension of endless creation. And imagine a Vishnu, a dimension of endless maintenance. Things were endlessly maintained. Immortality could be there. And then we had a dimension of Shiva, the Shiva's abode, where it was destruction, pretty much things being destroyed. Now, in this world and the type of civilization we're building, actually, instead of slowing down civilization, instead of trying to make the world soft, we have to make ourselves a bit more intense in our approach to a civilization. You know, that means imagine your species is like an 8-year old has an 8-year old child's mind. Then you'd be like, holy shit, we gotta take care of this. You know. I think of myself as an object. What is the value? The objective, I can tell you my destiny. It has to do with the void. The body is going to stop existing always as the way it is now. That's the destiny of the object. It just breaks and endlessly comes back and breaks, endlessly comes back and breaks. And so that's the nature of the object. So it goes to the void. When I look at my subjective life, the only value aside from it just being limited to my inner realm is to share it. I can't perceive any other, you know, efficient move than that. That I'm a temporary being and I just share, with the realm. And I feel everybody, we're 8 billion beings that don't realize every day happens once. The mindset, the visions, the views of every day is different. And if you don't act on the day, then the night will look down on you. Because I realize that when there is a restriction of time, there is the emergence of the artificial. Because when there is fear, the person doesn't think, you know? And you can just say, if civilization becomes scarier and scarier, people are going to just make more chaotic decisions than ordered decisions. I feel that our whole species should just focus on building sky cities. It will give everybody's life a purpose. A sub purpose. That means they could live as whoever they are, but behind their life, if there's ever a moment where their self feels null, then they will kind of be like, okay, at least there's a civilization here that's gonna be here longer than me. Let me see if I could do something for it. And so what does this mean? This means that for the first time, in order to advance civilization, we need advanced members of civilization. And now, how do you advance the members of civilization where one is about their physical resources and not keeping them occupied with just works of labor. Hopefully, we could have a lot of technology replace physical labor, and human beings can create a complete cyberspace physical game. That means just because we're not robots are going to build our buildings, and there's not going to be a need for workers. Let's say construction workers. The construction workers can still go on in a cyberspace reality and do the same activities, but in a totally different context. So the cool thing is we want to have a win-win everywhere. Just think about it. If everybody is winning, if every action the person does, their individual self wins and their civilization wins, after everybody attempting the win-win, it becomes strange that we wonder, well, how could somebody be losing, right? And now the issue is the human greed part and the ego, and only if we can have a new ethos, a new language of a new type of human being that doesn't fall into the same habits. That means literally if you speak differently than your society, you are technically adding something to the society. Do you know? Because I don't know, what is the value of agreeing, you know? What is the value of following when your eyes are here as a unique event? Do you know? For me, the best way we should see it is that every person is a pilot of their own inner realms, okay? And when it comes to the outer realms, they can consciously input influence, you know? And I mean, honestly, language, because we're set into the character story modality, so the character has to change. And right now people, what their language is based on their look and their style. So you know what it is, it's this hilarious time where everybody's obsessed about style but nobody has style, because people are not living as free unique individuals. They're not honoring their own DNA. Technically, they're not realizing that their eyes don't have to, walk the same staircases as those before. Do you know? That means you don't know. Yeah, usually in these talks, I share my good views, my kind of what I feel is like the honorable things I've seen in philosophy. Do you know how many dishonorable things I've seen with philosophers as well? Everything has a shadow, of course, but if you notice the light, you have been street smart before you're alive. There has to come events. So the destiny of the human species is left to the evolution of language, and if language has to evolve with everybody's experience evolving, experience evolves through events. So we have to have event designers and cyberspace game developers. Somehow there should be an interlinking of these two industries, where human beings actually experience something new, and by experiencing something new can put new language on it. I created this term, coined this the language threshold. And I will tell you this, it was the most proudest and greatest moment of my life, one of the greatest moments of my life, when I came up with this concept. Because I realized it is what I feel inevitably, I think everybody would conclude this, but I think it's the most important concept for human beings. And what it means that we have levels of, we are experiencing life in ways that our language cannot depict. What does that mean? That means we reach a point through the dimension of our direct experience where the indirect language is no longer necessary. So literally there is more beyond the language that is defining the morality and the right and wrong. Because morality for me it's limited to the alphabet. you know? Languages, we should treat them as extraterrestrials who we have ideologically allowed to look at. They are like lenses. Language is a lens. You know, if somebody was to ask me, like, Mr. Within, what's your philosophy on everything? I'll be like, it's the truth is not contained in language. Language cannot contain truth. That's it. That is the biggest discovery as one human being, which I feel like a candle. Honestly, I feel like a candle. I think everybody feels like a candle. And time is noticing with every breath what is the value system. It's like endless. It's like a radar. The psychology is like a radar scan. Those old school radar scans, you know. And in those radar scans, it would every time it would suddenly see what was in the proximity. And that's the thing. With every breath, I get to see who I have been again and again and again and again. And once you notice the repetition of the inner realms, you become a viewer. That means you notice what I'm saying when I'm saying that you are a presence before you are a personality. And the presence is dynamic. The personality is more an image static, like painted, put on a wall. This scholar, Terence McKenna, again, he says culture evolves as fast as its language does, a culture, a society. And you can say that Terence McKenna also says culture and ideology is not your friends. And if you really take the implication of that, that means you are not what the language is limiting you to. So if you're not a creature of language, what kind of a creature are you? And the Continental Philosophers, through especially Carl Jung's genius of creating the term the collective unconscious. Carl Jung was so smart, guys. It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous, like how much like a chess master this guy saw so many moves ahead and set this word in motion as a backup for secular society to realize that inevitably, regardless of what story what image you paint on the world, if there's a potential that it's a multidimensional system, then ignorance to the potentiality of that multidimensional system when you can experientially access it is like it's like why miss out, you know? So imagine a civilization, even in Maslow's hierarchy, where Maslow self says self-actualization. I mean, when you look at those two words, what can you see? The self is the you, you know, the potential you, and the actualization is literally the kinetic occurrence of it. Do you see what I mean? And what does that mean? The potential you, the potential and the kinetic, just like how energy cannot be created or destroyed, they are being in one presence. So you can say, I mean, this is going to be kind of like hyper spiritual, but technically, space is a body for soul. For an attributeless presence of intelligent viewing field, you know. That means my findings in the conscious waking state are very different than the dream state. But the biggest revelation you get about the dream state is that it's the mind's ability to create a body and for you to experience while your body is asleep a subjective body. That means the mind is actually living a life. We are like two types of beings. A being, a level of just pure biological um, mobility, and on another level, like a pure sort of experiential, in the instant moment attention is just being there kind of thing, you know? The poet Rumi says, he said this 700 years ago, this guy, out beyond ideas of right doing and wrong doing, there is a place. I will meet you there. And when the soul sits on that grass, the world is too full to talk about. So that's the thing. Rumi saw the future. A silent yet efficient advance in complete and collective civilization, where we have honored energy for the opportunity of the human face. That means, I remember when I was in school, I was so quiet and silent, you know, that I could totally see that for me, the concept of some things being cool or not cool, what had to do with aura, actually, where I felt it was a sort of atmosphere. I never think there's no such thing as cool or uncool people. It's just an atmosphere. It's a space, a space of mind, you can say. And so I remember I would feel kind of I was shy and quiet, and this silent kid who just didn't feel comfortable being himself. I was locked in my inner realms pretty much, and I would have moments where, like, afterwards, after, like, I found myself in nature, and I suddenly saw nature, the birds and the animals, and it was like, for a second, for me, it was it was like, yeah, it's like when you want to see coolness, it's just evolutionary step. The new is always where the attention goes. There's no such thing. We have painted the faces of the objective realm, but now we have also painted the face of the subjective realm. If you stop painting, if you stop, believe it or not, thinking you're a thought that is thinking, and you just get rid of that whole model and you just watch your moment, you will be surprised how your own nature realigns you. That means if you stop doing something that is artificial to yourself, you will strangely, you suddenly, the intelligence becomes very, uh, it centers itself. It's kind of strange. It's as if we think our minds are natural, the body naturally heals itself. What if the mind naturally heals itself if we stop like beating it up with language? You know what I mean? So, anyways, guys, thanks for listening. Um, I will be in the Discord community for the patrons. Much blessings and all. And something about Einstein. Uh, they asked him once that somebody told him, like, a messy desk is a sign of a messy mind. He had so many papers and notes on his desk. And then Einstein turned back and said, "What does a desk with no papers on it imply then?" It's like you're not messy, but there's nothing there. So it's definitely this. It's like an experiential event for the first time. Is surpassing the significance of any sort of existential ideology. So, anyways, guys, thanks for tuning in. Blessings.